we have the pleasure to hear from SDJM of Soraideo, Sri Asyutananda Soikia sir. He was also there as one of the judicial officers in Kokrajhar district. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
I welcome you to the third episode of our lecture series. We have the pleasure to hear from you, and we thank you for accepting our invitation as a speaker guest, and for accepting to speak on CRPC, which is one of the to say that in a practice world, it's one of the Bible or Gita. When anybody enters into a practice world, the procedure law is very much important. But today we are only covering the criminal procedure part. We will not be touching upon the civil procedure part. So I welcome you, sir. Your presence and your deliberation will definitely enlighten the students, and your lecture will give like a refresher to the students, because in the past semester, that means in the previous semester, at present the one who are in the fourth semester, they have studied CRPC in the previous semester, but they have not been able to write the exam because of the pandemic. So I'm
Yes.
sure that your deliberation on the subject will refresh their mind, and as and when the exam will be conducted by the university, they will be able to write better by remembering your lectures. So I welcome to you, sir, and I also welcome to the teachers and non-teaching staff of Kokrajhar Law College, and I also uh, would like to extend my heartiest welcome to the students and participants across our college, or other the outside of our college also, all the participants. And I extend my warm gratitude to the IQSC team of Kokrajhar Law College for organizing such a thoughtful program, uh, keeping in mind the interests of the students and all others, and also in order to continue the academic activities during this global pandemic. So with these few words, I once again welcome each of you. Thank you.
Can I proceed now?
No, sir. Dinah ma'am will introduce you,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. 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 Okay.
So now I would like to introduce our respected speaker, Sri S. Oke sir. Through his resume, before he come to the judicial field, he was a practicing lawyer in both civil and criminal side at District Court, Tezpur. After passing the judicial exam, he joined Assam Judicial Service as a first-class judicial magistrate, work in different capacity at Silsar, Kokrajhar, Gwalpara, and Gulaghat. Presently serving as Sub-Divisional Judicial Magistrate at District Court, Soraido. Now, I would like to request our respected speaker to proceed the program through his valuable speech regarding initiation of a criminal proceeding, a brief discussion. I think his valuable speech help our student to understand the criminal proceeding very clearly. Thank you. Now, sir, you can proceed your.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all present here, and for the special purpose that I've been given this opportunity to at least present some of my experiences, some of my observations that has come forth during my service career till now. And this has been a very good platform uh, today. And first of all, I'd like to provide or extend my prayers to the God to save this humanity from this pandemic. But still, we'll have to follow, we'll have to go up, because life is to be proceeded on. And so let's hope for the best. And so far as the today's topic is concerned, regarding this initiation of a criminal proceeding, uh, actually I am still a student of law, as you all are present here, I am still a student, and law is a kind of subject which you cannot take to be of a complete phenomenon. It is being changing time to time. Newer observations are coming on. There are newer theories are being coming on. So it will be a constant phenomenon which will be changing with the advancement of the society. So at present, in our society, what is being going on is to be given much importance, because I do not know as to after 10 years from today, maybe law will be a bit different from today. But basically, the basic aspect of law doesn't change. Though the concepts may change, though some theories may change, but the basic principle will never change. And this is based on what is taken to be related with the term proceeding. We all know what is meant by proceeding. Maybe it's a meeting in the village. There will be a proceeding there. There will be some sort of requirements to be followed in those kinds of meetings. One will keep some book. There will be some attendants who will put their signatures. There will be some resolutions taken in presence of the members of the community at which place the meeting is being going on. There will be some resolutions. There will be some observations. There will be some results. So this is the basic idea of what the term proceeding means. Now, when there is a criminal proceeding in the context of law, it means that there has to be some act which is said to be a crime. Now, if crime is against the society, there has to be some curative measures so that the crime is controlled, and the perpetrator who has committed the crime is to be punished. And the purpose of punishment, as far as the Indian law is concerned, as we all know, is based on the reformative theories, not of any retributive or any like strict theories. It is solely based on reformative theories. So this is the proceeding, which is a criminal in nature, in context with a judicial court. So, according to Blackstone, a famous jurist of England, according to him, a crime is an act which is forbidden by law and which is being committed by some perpetrator. We all know about it. So if something is regarded to be a crime, some act or omission, there may be act or omission. Suppose I am required to do some act, law wants me to do that, I do not do it, there will be an omission. This also will be a crime. Now, as the present scenario is concerned, we are being asked to stay inside, not to go outside. So if you go outside, it will be a crime according to section 51 and or section 188 of the IPC and section 51 of the Disaster Management Act. I think all are familiar with it. There are numerous government guidelines have been coming on. So the crime may be an act or omission, and that act or omission must be done with a criminal intent, criminal mind, which is said to be mens rea. We all know. And suppose I want to do some act or omission which is forbidden by law. This denotes that I have a criminal intent on me. So I have a mens rea. Now, my question is whether this availability or existence of the mens rea will itself denote a crime. And the possible answer will be no, because only the criminal intent is not sufficient. With that criminal intent, some act or omission must be done. That means the criminal intent must be acted upon. Maybe it's an act or omission, but it has to be acted upon. And as we have already come to know these terms, actus reus, that is, there has to be some act or omission. Then mens rea, that I have a criminal intent to do it, I have a dishonest intention to do it. And finally, there will be punishment. In our Indian context, I have already said that it's a reformative punishment. So, in doing all these things, suppose one man has committed some act which is said to be a crime. Now, he has to be brought to the purview of law. There has to be some procedures of collection of evidence, investigation, proof, and ultimately there will be some conclusion of the act in regard to the person who has committed it. And if we find that the guilt is proved, the man is punished, or the guilt is not proved, then the man will be acquitted. So, in doing all these things, as we already know, there has to be a principle to be followed, which is said to be the audi alteram partem, because we have to hear the other side, and we must hear the other side, because without hearing the other side, we cannot proceed. So if in the proceeding, some other attributions are there, because I have already given an example that a man, suppose a man who has committed some act or omission which is forbidden by law, that means it is stated to be a crime, then he has to be brought to the purview of law. There has to be investigation or inquiry. There has to be collection of evidence, and there has to be arguments, and that argument must come from both the sides. Even in the collection of evidence, in a judicial proceeding, that means the proceeding which is being taken place inside a court premises, the other side, that means the perpetrator, who will be put to the defense, because prosecution will bring up the case against that person who has committed the crime. I said as an example to be A. Now this A has to be given the opportunity of defending himself. So there has to be a defense lawyer who will defend the case. Suppose one witness comes and he deposes some material against the person, then the defense will be asked to put that witness to the test of cross-examination to impeach the credit of the witness. And if defense succeeds in impeaching the credit of the witness, that means impeaching the credit of the witness means to make the witness not believable, to make some statement of the witness not believable in the normal parlance. This is said to be the impeaching credit of the witness. We will find out that concept in the Indian Evidence Act. So if the defense succeeds in impeaching the credit of the witness, then the case of the prosecution, which is being brought before a court, now as far as the court is concerned, I or the other persons being like magistrates or judges, they will judge as to whether this witness has to be believed or not, based on the case that has been brought by the prosecution, and based on the cross-examination part by which the defense has impeached the credit. And finally, in those processes, when the court finds that no, this case is not proved by prosecution beyond reasonable doubt. So these three words, or a phrase I can say, beyond reasonable doubt, then the court, if the court finds that the case is not proved beyond reasonable doubt, then the benefit of doubt will go in favor of the accused. That means our example A, and who will be acquitted. And if the court finds that no, the prosecution has been successful in proving the case beyond all reasonable doubt, then there will be conviction, and ultimately the case will end up in punishment, maybe fine, maybe imprisonment, maybe admonition, etc., etc. There are other laws. So this is the concept of proceeding in a court. Now, as far as our topic is concerned, initiation of a criminal proceeding, this has to be taken in mind as to how the process is initiated. Am I understandable? Am my voices are going clearly?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
okay, okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So how the process is initiated? As a normal understanding, we all know that we have to go to the police station and file an FIR or the first information report. Now, section 190 of the Criminal Procedure Code, you will refer to it. You will find that when the magistrate or a court takes cognizance of an offense. Now, what is meant by this word cognizance? Cognizance is the judicial notice of a fact that some act or omission has been committed by somebody else. Let us, in our example A, this A has committed some act or omission which is forbidden by law, and the court holds that, or the magistrate, or by law. Actually, I have to, I must put the term law, which law holds that this is a crime. That understanding by the judges or magistrate, as per law, is said to be taking cognizance of the offense. মানে আমাৰ অসমীয়াত যদি ক'বলৈ যাওঁ, মানে আমি ধৰি লৈছো যে কিবা এটা ক্ৰাইম হৈছে, কিবা এটা কাম কোনোবাই কৰিলে, আমি সেই কামটো সেই মানুহজনে কৰিছে সেইটো ফৰবিডেন বাই ল হয় নে নহয়, সেই বস্তুটো যেতিয়া আমি দেখিম যে হয় ইট ইজ ফৰবিডেন বাই ল, সো দিস ইজ এ ক্ৰাইম। যেতিয়া আমি ধৰি লম যে দ্যাট ইজ এ ক্ৰাইম, দিস ইজ টেকিং কগনিজেন্স। যদি আমি ধৰো নো দিস ইজ নট এ ক্ৰাইম, দ্যাট ইজ নট টেকিং কগনিজেন্স। নাও আই থিংক আই এম ক্লিয়ার। So how the magistrate takes cognizance of an offense? Section 190 CRPC is there. You will find upon a police report, upon a complaint, or upon information of some other person, or upon self-knowledge of the magistrate. Now, as far as section 190 A, B and C are there. A is saying that upon receiving a complaint of facts. Now, as we all know, section 2D, section 2 clause small d of the Code of Criminal Procedure says what is a complaint. There has to be some oral or written representation of some facts before a magistrate by some person which discloses commission of certain act or omission which is taken to be forbidden by law. This is said to be a complaint. So one has to come to the court or before a magistrate. He has to orally state before the magistrate that these things has happened, committed by A, and those are forbidden by law. Therefore, the A has committed this offense, or maybe that person who is making the oral submission doesn't know what offense he has committed. Then the court will see as to what offense has been committed. And now, upon going through the oral testimony of the person who has submitted before the court or the magistrate, if the magistrate holds that yes, A has committed some act or omission which is forbidden by law, and this is an offense, maybe it is a particular offense as prescribed in the Indian Penal Code. What offense? Maybe theft, maybe murder, maybe rape, maybe criminal breach of trust, maybe cheating. So court will see as to what offense has been committed by the person. If something is committed, whether it is an offense or not, and if it is accepted to be an offense, then what offense has been committed. Then the court will take cognizance and issue process to the person who is alleged to have committed the offense, so that asking that person to appear before the court and to face the trial. And when he will face the trial, there will be processes of collection of evidence, argument, and final judgment will be there. So a complaint, when may be made before a magistrate, there is no specific time. However, there is specific time for taking cognizance. 468 of CRPC is there. There are some limitations. Actually, today's topic is not concerned with it, but still, while taking cognizance of an offense, there are certain limitations. Suppose there is a case of cheating. That cheating prescribes punishment for 7 years. Suppose there is a case for theft. Theft prescribes punishment for 3 years. So cognizance cannot be taken beyond 3 years from the date of commission of the offense. Suppose one person has committed the offense 4 years ago and complaint is made before me today, that means beyond 3 years, so I must not take cognizance because the limitation is already over. So there are certain limitations for taking cognizance by the magistrate, but there is no limitation for filing a complaint before magistrate. So one person comes to a magistrate, he may state orally, which the magistrate will reduce the same in writing, and which will be a complaint. And the person who is coming to court may file a written complaint himself. Generally, no oral complaints are being made because one comes to court, there are lawyers, because we are laymen. As a simple person, not being a magistrate, we are laymen. We will come to the court. We will take assistance of the lawyers. The lawyers will make a draft of what is being to be presented before the court, and that draft will represent that A has committed certain these things or he has not done certain these things. So this is an offense. That writing will be placed before the court, and court will examine the person who is making the complaint, and he is termed to be the complainant. The court will examine the complainant, and the complainant may bring certain other witnesses with him, according to whom those witnesses will support his case. Then court will also record their statements. Then elaborating all those statements together with the statements made in the complaint, if the court finds that yes, A has committed certain offense, then the court will take cognizance. Or if the court finds that no, A has committed no offense, then the court will dismiss the complaint. These provisions, section 2D of CRPC specifies the definition of complaint. Now, how the complaint is to be made, this is specified from section 200 to 204 of CRPC. Section 200 CRPC says how a complaint is to be made, who will be the complainant, what are the essentials of a complaint. There are simple essentials of a complaint. They may be certain person has to be the complainant, and he has to state something against somebody. Here in our example A, that this A has committed some act or omission which is forbidden by law, and to the detriment of some other person. That means if something is done, it has to harm somebody, maybe a particular individual, maybe the state itself, that means the entire society. There has to be some victim. If there is no victim, there will be no crime. So in such cases, there will be a complainant. He will state certain facts which has to disclose commission of certain offense. Then the complaint is made in writing, or the complainant is stating orally before the court. Then the court will summarize all these things and make an inquiry. Now, what is the facts to be followed in the inquiry before court? The court will ask the complainant to bring his other witnesses, whom, according to whom they will going to support his case. Then court will ask those witnesses to come. Court will hear their statement also, whether those witnesses are supporting this complainant's allegations or not. Then the court may make a direction to police or some other person to make some investigation also. That investigation is not an investigation done by police after registration of an FIR. Here, section 202 of CRPC discloses if a concept of investigation by police on the behest of the court, which will be an added advantage for the court to find out as to whether actually this thing has happened or not. That means court will ask police to make a brief inquiry visiting the place of occurrence or taking evidence some other materials as to whether this person's allegations are supported or not. That is prescribed by 202 of CRPC. Then after this inquiry, examining the witnesses or the complainant under section 200 or inquiry under section 202, this, if all these facts are summarized and the court finds that yes, this person has committed some offense, then the court will take cognizance and issue process under section 203 of CRPC. Now 203 of CRPC, section 203 of CRPC is stating that when the court takes cognizance, court may issue warrant, court may issue summons, or court may issue warrant in addition or in lieu of summons. These summons or warrants are issued to make that person to appear before court. Yes, you have committed this offense. These are the facts. So you are to appear before court and to face the trial. Because the complainant is there, the complainant side is said to be the prosecution. Prosecution will prove, and if the prosecution succeeds in proving, then there will be conviction. If the prosecution fails in proving beyond reasonable doubt. So this is the process of making a complaint before magistrate. So section 190 clause A is stating that the court can take cognizance of an offense upon a complaint made before it. So I have already stated as to how the complaint is made. One more important aspect. When the court finds that no offense is committed by the person, or the facts of the inquiry discloses commission of no offense, then what the court will do? The court will record the reasons and court will dismiss the complaint. That means the court will not proceed. Our topic is today initiation of criminal proceeding. Now, this proceeding was initiated with the lodging of the complaint. Court finds that yes, he has committed an offense, A has committed an offense, so we are to proceed for trial, issue process, taking cognizance. Or the court, if the court doesn't take cognizance, court will dismiss the complaint. That means the proceeding is stopped thereby. So this is the process of complaint before magistrate. This is a very important aspect, because while we are sitting as a magistrate in court, we are already taking cognizance of offenses. Definitely you already know there are cases coming before us. We have to try the cases and we have to pass judgments. Do these cases come before us in two ways: on police report or on complaint? So this process of entertaining a complaint is very essential, and this is also one of the important aspects which is being coming in the examinations very frequently. This question, how the complaint is made, what is the procedure in dealing with the complaint. Now section 190 CRPC subclause B is stating that upon a police report. Now what is meant by the police report? We may be familiar with the term charge sheet submitted by police, charging that somebody has committed an offense. Or sometimes when the police during investigation finds no offense, then the police files final report. Now this charge sheet or the final report is together termed to be the final form. There is a form which is said to be the final form. Police is required to file the final form as provided under section 173 of CRPC. This section is very important. 173 of CRPC. Now, how the police will file the final form? Based on what materials? Now, this starts with the initiation of filing of the FIR or lodging of the FIR. So now suppose that person who has come before the court to file a complaint, he may choose not to come to the court, or he may choose to go straightway to the police station, and he may state the allegations of commission or omission of certain offense before the officer in charge of the police station, either orally or in writing. Suppose I, being the complainant, I choose to file FIR before a police station, before the officer in charge of a police station, and I go to the police station. I meet the officer in charge of the police station, and I state that these things has happened. This person A has committed this act. This is an offense, so action has to be taken against him. So if I state it orally, the officer in charge is bound to reduce the same in writing. This is provided under section 154 of the CRPC, 154 CRPC. Or I can choose to file a written FIR also. I do not want to state verbally or orally. I have already get a FIR or allegations drafted by some expert, maybe a lawyer, maybe some other person who is expert in law, and I present that writing before the officer in charge of a police station. Then there will be a written format of the FIR. Now, after the receipt of the FIR, the officer in charge of the police station is bound to register it in case the offense is cognizable offense. Now, cognizable offense and non-cognizable offenses are there, separated by the schedule of this criminal procedure code. You will go through it, you will find what offenses are cognizable, what offenses are non-cognizable. Now, here, these cognizable or non-cognizable offenses are divided only for the fact that when the offense is cognizable, the police is to start investigation instantly upon receipt of a complaint. That means the FIR. And if the offense is non-cognizable to police, then police has to reduce the facts of the FIR converted into a diary that is said to be a general diary entry, and police will direct the complainant to proceed to the court because the offense is non-cognizable to police. So you proceed to the court, you file a complaint before court. Then the person will come to court and file a complaint under section 200, and then the court will proceed with the procedures prescribed under 200 to 204. So now, first of all, let us insist on what are the FIR in case of cognizable offenses. Now, suppose one person approaches a court because his motorcycle has been stolen away from the garage of his house in the previous night by some unknown person. I am giving an example only. That person will come to the court. This is an offense of theft. Punishment prescribed under section 379 of IPC. Now the victim or any person on behalf of him, that is the complainant, will come to the police station, the concerned police station having jurisdiction of the particular area where from the motorcycle has been stolen. Then he will state orally his allegations, or he will present a writing. Suppose I, being the officer in charge of the police station, I will accept that. I will reduce it into a specific diary which is said to be the general diary. I will make a entry in the general diary that today, suppose today is 22nd of May. Today this person has come before a court and making these allegations. So these allegations are accepted, and suppose Kokrajhar police station case number 90/2021, that means FIR number 90 year 2021 is registered. So in this way the FIR is registered under section 379 of IPC. That means under offense 379 of IPC. So the FIR is registered. Then police will record the statement of the complainant that is provided there under 162 of CRPC. How the statement of a witness to be recorded. Police will reduce the statement made by the complainant or the other witnesses into writing, and 162 provides that police officer is not to take signatures of the witnesses, because while recording statements of the witnesses by police during investigation of the particular FIR, that means the case of theft of the motorcycle, police is not a court. Therefore, police will not record the statement on oath. The witnesses are not required to take oath before giving their statements. Therefore, they are not required to put their signatures there. Then court will, the police officer, that means the investigating officer, will visit the place of occurrence. Suppose I being the complainant, my motorcycle stolen from my garage in the previous night. Police will come here. Police will investigate as to it, in what part I have placed the motorcycle, whether the motorcycle was locked or not, whether that garage is accessible to the others easily or not. If it was not accessible easily, maybe the thief has climbed up a 5 feet wall, then in which direction he came. So police will make an assessment and will prepare a sketch map of the place of occurrence. This sketch map is prepared. This will be a part of the sketch map, will be a part of the case diary. That I forgot to mention about the case diary. Now the FIR is registered by the officer in charge of police station. Then there will be a diary. That means a file. Simply, it is a file which has to be maintained by the investigating officer. Now the officer in charge of the police station who registers the case, he may himself investigate the offense, or he may depute some other police officer to make the investigation. There has to be an endorsement. Yes, I myself investigate, or yes, no, the other officer by name, he is to investigate the case. There will have to be an endorsement, and on the basis of that endorsement, the investigation starts. And the investigation when starts, the person, that means who is going to investigate, is said to be the investigating officer. He will maintain a diary that today on 22nd at suppose 10:30 a.m. I have been entrusted to investigate, and on receipt of the entrustment, what I have done, or I have sit idly for 2-3 days, and then after 2-3 days I will go for my investigation to the place of occurrence. This is not wanting. He has to, the investigating officer has to take immediate action. So on which date, at what time he has taken those steps has to be maintained in a diary. This is said to be the general diary or the case diary. Case diary means in connection with the particular case of theft of the motorcycle. Now, as I have already said, while maintaining the case diary, the investigating officer has recorded statement of the complainant, the other witnesses. Then the investigating officer will come to the place of occurrence, will prepare a sketch map as to from what place, in what condition, and then where the motorcycle was kept, where from it was stolen, whether accessible. I've already stated. He will prepare a sketch map of the particular area. Then he may record statement of some other neighboring persons residing there who may have noticed some perpetrator moving around in the night in suspicious circumstances. Then these kind of statements will add in investigation, because maybe there are some CCTV cameras installed. So one witness say that I have seen some person moving for about 1 hour at this particular area at the dead hour of the night, maybe at 12 or 1 p.m. 1 a.m. sorry, 12 midnight or 1 a.m. Without having any purpose. So there is suspicion. There is suspicion. So the CCTV cameras may be inquired into by the investigating officer, may be seized. Maybe those footages may be examined as to whether any person is seen, as stated by the witness, whether actually some person was moving, what is the identity of the person. This this investigation of these facts may depend on case to case. In some other cases, in the village areas, there is no question of installation of any CCTV cameras. So there will be some investigation footage will be at some different concepts. So in those kinds, the police will record statement of witnesses, visit place of occurrence, prepare a sketch map, will appoint sources so that the motorcycle can be located. And finally, if the police is able, or the investigating officer is able to arrest some person or to recover the motorcycle from the possession of that person, then the police officer will arrest him. What is the procedure to be followed by police in arrest is provided under section 41 of CRPC. How arrest is to be made, when arrest is to be made, in what procedure arrest is to be made, whether the person is hiding somewhere, police have the access to make a search of that person so as to arrest. these provisions are there in from section 41 of the CRPC. Then finally, suppose the police arrest someone, then police has to follow section 167 of CRPC. That means from the time of arrest, the person, the arrestee, has to be produced before the magistrate within 24 hours, excluding the time taken for journey. Suppose the investigating officer is in Kokrajhar police station. The FIR was filed at Kokrajhar police station, and the person who has stolen the motorcycle is arrested from Dibrugarh, or the motorcycle is recovered from Dibrugarh. In such circumstances, the investigating officer may find it difficult to proceed with the arrested person from Dibrugarh to Kokrajhar within 24 hours. So the journey taken, the time taken in the journey has to be excluded. Excluding that time, the investigating officer must produce the accused before the magistrate. Suppose the case is at Kokrajhar, but the person is arrested at Delhi. So 24 hours will not be sufficient. Even the journey time may also enhance. In such circumstances, there has to be a transit remand. That means the person is arrested from Delhi. Some Delhi magistrate has to pass an order so that giving some sufficient time for the investigating officer to bring that person from Delhi to Kokrajhar. In that case also, the investigating officer or any other person assisting him who has arrested the person at Delhi must follow this 24-hour principle, because within that 24 hour, he has to present the arrestee before the magistrate at Delhi, who will in turn observe that this person is produced before me within 24 from the time of arrest. Now this person is to be taken to Kokrajhar in connection with so and so case of theft of the motorcycle. So since time taken will be a bit bigger, then the magistrate will authorize the person who has arrested to bring that person from Delhi to Kokrajhar to produce before magistrate at Kokrajhar is within a specific time, maybe 5 days, maybe 7 days. Then if the magistrate, suppose if the magistrate at Delhi lets 7 days time, then it is up to the investigating officer to bring that person from Delhi to the magistrate at Kokrajhar within those 7 days. This is the first principle. That 24-hour principle is still there because the person arrested at Delhi is produced before a magistrate at Delhi within 24 hours. This must be done. So 24-hour principle is there. Now, suppose I being a magistrate, this arrested person is produced before me. So this person is, we have suspicion that this person has stolen the motorcycle. So his motorcycle is recovered from him, or on his statement, it is going to be recovered. So there are materials. So this person is arrested and produced before you. Now the court will take the person in judicial custody if the police is not praying for police custody. Sometimes, suppose the motorcycle is not yet recovered, but evidence is found during investigation by the investigating officer that the person who is arrested actually had stolen the motorcycle and thereafter he sold it to someone else. Now, in such circumstances, the police may require police custody of the person arrested, for the reason that which leading by that person arrested, the police or the investigating officer will go or will search out the person to whom the perpetrator or the thief had sold the motorcycle. So in such circumstances, maybe there will be requirement of taking police custody. At that circumstance, the magistrate may allow police custody or may not allow, depending on the facts and circumstances placed before the magistrate by the investigating officer. Suppose the police custody is allowed, then police will take back the person arrested. The police will have to follow certain guidelines. The person will not be tortured. The person will be given proper food, the person will be given proper medical facilities, the person will be given proper hygiene, proper clothing, etc., etc. And by the side, the police will make the required investigation. That means the police will make search of the person to whom the thief had sold the motorcycle. Then after completion of that investigation, within the time limit given by the court of police custody, suppose police custody was given for 2 days, within those 2 days, that has to be completed by the investigating officer. And after completion of the 2 days, the person will have to again be produced before the magistrate. Now thereafter, the magistrate will consider for bail of the person or jail of the person. Jail means a judicial custody, because until and unless the offense is proved, in our law, we are already aware that we take it to be, we take that person to be innocent. Until and unless one is proved guilty, he is deemed to be innocent. So why an innocent person is given to police custody? There may be questions. Why the innocent person is given to police custody? Why the innocent person is taken to judicial custody, sent to jail? These answer to these questions are: sending him to jail or sending him to police custody is not punishing him, but to give opportunity for the investigating officer to make a proper investigation. Suppose if I do not allow police custody, when the police custody was wanting, then investigation might be hampered. As a citizen of India, the magistrate is also a citizen of India. So any citizen of India has to aid in investigation. So on the basis of an order of a magistrate, the investigation is hampered, the victim is not going to get justice. So for upliftment of justice, these are to be considered. So the magistrate may allow police custody. The magistrate may send the person to judicial custody. Judicial custody is custody of the court. But when the court is no space to keep the person, then court will send the person to jail under supervision of the jail superintendent and under overall supervision of the court who has taken that person into custody, so that the person doesn't abscond, so that the person doesn't come to witnesses to influence them not to state the truth before the court. So these are to be taken into consideration so that the investigation is not hampered. Now the person who is arrested, he has some rights. We already know he has a right to be assisted by a lawyer. He has a right to be heard for his bail. So he will file a bail application before court. So I may be allowed to go on bail. If the court finds that bail may be allowed, there are facts and circumstances which are to be taken into consideration. Maybe today's topic is not tending for it. The court will generally consider as to whether this person is to be released on bail or not. If the court finds that yes, some sufficient part of investigation is already been completed, or there is no chance of the person of absconding, or that there is no chance of the person be influencing the witnesses so as to dissuade those witnesses from telling the exact truth, then the court may consider for bail. Again, let me refer back to section 167 of CRPC, which says that person has to be produced before magistrate within 24 hours. This thing already been done. The person is produced before 24 hours. He has been given to jail. Now, till what time the person may be detained in jail without filing the final form by police? If the offense is punishable up to 10 years, not more than that, then the person, the arrestee, cannot be taken into custody for more than 60 days. And if the offense is punishable with more than 10 years, then the person cannot be taken into judicial custody for more than 90 days. Beyond that, if the police has yet to file the final form, that means yet to complete the investigation, after expiry of that 60 days or 90 days, the person has accrued, a right has accrued to that person to be released him on bail. Then the court must release the person on bail. There will be no requirement of filing any separate bail application for that. So this is provided in section 167 of CRPC. This is also one of the important aspects of the criminal procedure code. Now, suppose the investigating officer has finally concluded the investigation. Now he has visited the place of occurrence, he has recorded statement of the witness, he has recovered the motorcycle, then he has already prepared a sketch map of the place of occurrence. He has also examined as to whether the recovered motorcycle is actually belonging to the complainant. That means, suppose my motorcycle was stolen, whether that motorcycle actually belongs to me or not, because some others motorcycle may be that. If it is, then it is not my motorcycle stolen. So these facts are also to be considered by police. Then upon consideration of all these facts, if the police finds that yes, this person, that means the thief who is arrested, has committed the offense, then the police will file a report that is provided under 173 of CRPC. That report, if the police finds that yes, offense is committed by this person, then the police will file a charge sheet. That means police will file a charge against that person under the offense of theft, 379 of IPC. Now suppose the result of investigation is that the police doesn't find any clue, no person could be arrested, the motorcycle could not be recovered for quite a long time, even after due diligence by the investigating officer, then the investigating officer will not keep the case pending for long and may file a report that the fact was true. The fact of stealing of the motorcycle from my garage is found to be true, but there is no clue of the motorcycle or no clue of the perpetrator. Then the police may file a final report. That means there will be no charge because there is no person to charge, no recovery is there. So against whom the charge will be made? There is no person to charge. Then the police will file a final form. This final report. So this final report or the charge sheet is said to be the final form as per the format provided under section 173 of CRPC. Now suppose in the first case, that means the police has arrested someone, recovered the motorcycle, and after investigation finds material against that person arrested that he was the thief, and police will file a charge sheet. And after filing of the charge sheet, the case will now come to the court. Case will now come to the court before the magistrate, who will now consider section 190B. Section 190B of CRPC says that magistrate may take cognizance on the basis of a police report. So here is police report has come, charge is there against that person who is in judicial custody or maybe who is in bail. Then the court will consider those materials placed before the court by the investigating officer as provided under section 173 of CRPC, and the court will reckon it and apply the judicial mind. And if the court finds again that yes, a prima facie material is there which tends to direct or which is presumed that the person has committed the offense of theft, then the court will take cognizance now. As the same way, when the court has taken cognizance after examination of the complainant or the witnesses or an inquiry as per section 200 to 203 of CRPC. Now, when the court takes the cognizance, court will ask the person to appear before court. If the person is on bail, issue summons or warrant, or if the person is not in bail in judicial custody, then court will ask the superintendent of the concerned district or the central jail to produce the person before the court to face the trial. So this is the second aspect of initiation of the criminal proceeding. I've already said the first aspect is filing a complaint before magistrate. Then if the complaint is filed orally or in writing, what the court will do, what procedures is to be followed by the court, that means the magistrate. Now the second aspect is no complaint is filed, but an FIR is filed. Now, what is the result of the FIR? I have already said there is a charge sheet against some person who is arrested regarding the case of theft of my motorcycle. Then the court will take cognizance here. then the court will, in both these cases, taking cognizance maybe in the complaint filed before the magistrate or taking cognizance on the police report filed before the magistrate. Now the magistrate will proceed with the trial of the offense against the accused, who is said to be the accused. That means here the thief is said to be the accused. He is not the guilty. He is the accused. He is being accused of committing the crime. And the court will provide that person with a defense lawyer. There will be evidence. There will be counter evidence. There will be cross-examination. The Indian Evidence Act has to be followed. Evidence has to be given only of facts in issue or of relevant facts and of no others. We already know. So by those process, if the court finds that the person, yes, the prosecution has been able to prove the guilt of theft against the person beyond reasonable doubt, then the person will be punished. And if the prosecution fails to prove, at least there is a slightest doubt left, then the benefit of doubt will go to the person will be acquitted. This is the second aspect of taking cognizance. First is complaint, second is police report. After taking cognizance, the process before court is same, be it a complaint, be it a police report. Slight procedural differences are there. We are not concerned with it for today's topic. And the third, section 190 clause C is providing upon knowledge of some other person or upon own knowledge of the magistrate. Suppose one witness in the process of this trial of the theft case of the motorcycle comes before the court and deposes certain facts. Now, court will ask the person to depose on oath. We are already aware of it. মানুহক কয় নহয় যে কক আপুনি যি কম मैं जो बोलूंगा सच बोलूंगा सच के सिवा कुछ नहीं बोलूंगा. I will state the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So this is the oath given to the witness. So now the witness deposes something. He is put to cross-examination by defense. The cross-examination impeaches the credit of the witness. Now, in those processes, if the court finds that the person deposing before court, even after taking oath, is false, that means the witness is deposing, making false statements before court during evidence, then the court may proceed against that person for perjury, giving false evidence in court. In that case, no one will be required to file any complaint before the magistrate, because it is the magistrate who is recording this evidence of the witness, finds himself that the witness is deposing lie, deposing some false statements. Then the magistrate may proceed against that person instantly by registering a complaint on the order of the magistrate himself for giving false evidence. So this is taking cognizance by the own knowledge of the magistrate. I think I have nothing to proceed further. The basic principles of taking cognizance by the magistrate after initiation of the criminal proceeding, I have already gone through, and I think I could have at least catered to the idea what I have in these times of my practice and service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your valuable speech. I think all students understand clearly about the criminal initiation, but some students have asked some questions. Yes. I want to read. The first question is that, sir, I filed a complaint to the police station in Kokrajhar, and officers of the police station registered my FIR too, and he went to the police a place of occurrence along with me. The fact of occurrence was stolen bike of my friend from the wedding ceremony, and then he took some information and note down in his diary. But my question is that to submit charge sheet or final report to the honorable court, how many days he will take or can take? That is the question from one of his students, is Sundam Wari.
Okay, this is a very nice question. Thing is that I have already said there is no exact time limit prescribed, but the one thing is that no delay or no unnecessary delay has to be caused by the investigating officer. There may be circumstances that the investigating officer is burdened with not only that case which is being registered before him, but there are other cases also. But still, the investigating officer is wanting to conclude the investigation at the earliest possible time. And if the theft of the motorcycle case is there, if the motorcycle could have been recovered, or if any clue has been found, then that clue is to be proceeded with. The person perpetrators may be arrested, maybe the motorcycle, if there is chance of recovery, then it has to be recovered and charge sheet is to be filed. Or otherwise, keeping the case pending for investigation for long will cause detriment to the victim. That means the person whose motorcycle was stolen, because justice is also for his behalf also. Because my motorcycle is stolen, I want a solution, recovery of my motorcycle, and I may be compensated. So those compensation or recovery or my consolation will be justice for me. So I have a right to get the justice. So that right is not to be delayed. Exact time is not prescribed, but it has to be, investigation has to be completed at the earliest possible time. But one question is very important to be taken into consideration here. Suppose if the investigating officer files the charge sheet after expiry of 3 years from the date of lodging of the FIR, because the maximum punishment imposed for the offense of theft is 3 years. I have already said 468 of CRPC prescribes certain limitations to be followed in taking cognizance by the magistrate of an offense. So if the charge sheet is filed after expiry of 3 years, limitation is gone. The magistrate cannot take cognizance. That means the case will not proceed unless the investigating officer satisfies the magistrate that for some valid reason investigation could not be done within those 3 limitation period. A possible example maybe of our present scenario. The total country is reeling under this pandemic. So in such circumstances, we cannot force the investigation, getting officers to conclude investigation, because there are different hurdles we know. So in such circumstances, suppose there is 6 months delay in investigation only because of the reason of pandemic situation, then I think the reason will be a sufficient reason for allowing the delay. Then the court may take cognizance even beyond the periodical limitation. If reason is of important aspect is to be taken into consideration is that the delay is occasioned not unnecessarily but for some valid reason. I think I have given my answer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your clear answer. Next question is, the police officer arrested a person on Saturday, then the police will produce the person on Sunday or Monday?
Now, if the person is arrested on Saturday, suppose at 2 p.m., so he has to be produced before the magistrate on Sunday 2 p.m. Maybe on Sunday the court is closed, but the magistrate is always on duty, and there has to be at least one magistrate present at the station. The station will not be left unattended by any magistrate, only because of the reason that the person who is arrested has a right to be produced before the magistrate within 24 hours. So basically, if he is arrested on Saturday, maybe at 2 p.m., then on Sunday before 2 p.m., he must be produced before the magistrate.
Thank you, sir.
But see, in some other circumstances, if the person is to be brought from, if the person is arrested at Dibrugarh, cases there at Kokrajhar, then definitely Saturday to Sunday will be difficult at this pandemic situation. There will be time taken. So I've already stated that some magistrate at Dibrugarh may extend the time. These things will be taking place, but still the person arrested at Dibrugarh must be produced before a magistrate at Dibrugarh within 24 hours before bringing that person to Kokrajhar.
Thank you, sir. Another one of the question is that this is the last questions. Whether filing complaint through telephonic conversation to investigation officer can be taken as evidence to prove an accused guilt or not guilty before magistrate.
I will request for repeat of the question again.
Okay, sir. whether filing complaint through telephonic conversation to investigation officer can be
Yes.
taken as evidence to prove an
Yes.
accused guilty or not guilty before magistrate.
The simple answer is no. As far as I have understood regarding the question put, thing is that I am making a telephonic call to a police officer and telling him telephonically that some offense is being committed by some person. Then whether that telephonic conversation will be taken to be evidence against that person so as to bring that person or to so as to prove guilt of that person. I think this is the question. In such circumstance, it is no evidence at all. This is merely an information to police. Maybe I am in a situation, so I have to file an FIR or to lodge a complaint before police, not before court, before police. Then I do not find a sufficient time to move to the police station, or there may be some exigencies where I may be required to give a telephonic call to police immediately after the occurrence. Maybe there is, suppose some accident has taken place on a highway, some person is being injured. The police station is at a distance of maybe about 1 or 2 kilometers. Then at that time, I will be required to make an instant telephonic call to the police station and make the statement telephonically that some offense has been committed, because vehicle accident is also an offense. 279 of IPC punishment is prescribed there. In such circumstances, when I have made a telephonic statement to police, telephonic conversation to police, or telephonic information to police that some offense has been committed, the police will record the facts of the statement given by the person who is giving the information into a writing, which is said to be a general diary entry. And if the offense is a cognizable offense, then the police will instantly start investigation. Police will not wait for lodging of a proper FIR. In certain circumstances, the telephonic information may also be regarded as an FIR or the first information report, but that is not an evidence. Evidence will only come up after investigation by police. What the police collects in investigation, not the statement given to him by telephone. I think I'm clear.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable space regarding the brief discussion regarding the initiation of the criminal proceedings. So now I request our coordinator of IQAC cell, Sri Suresh Vasumutari, to deliver his voter thanks speech. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Good morning, all of you. On behalf of Kokrajhar Law College, I, Sri Suresh Vasumutari, IQAC coordinator, would like to offer vote of thanks of today's third episode of online lecture series. At first, I would like to thank today's keynote speaker, Sri Ashitananda Soikia, Sir, SDGM, Soraidew, Assam.
Thank you.
For such a guiding, informative, real applications and valuable sessions on initiation of a criminal proceeding. I hope this session would be benefited for the students who are judicial service aspirants and students who are ambitious of becoming practicing advocates. And I also would like to thank our principal IC, Ms. Preeta Brahma ma'am, for taking initiative and giving such a platform for organizing such an informative and valuable webinar sessions. And I also especially would like to thank Srimati Daina Dwara ma'am, my colleague, for inviting today's honorable speaker, Soikia sir, to grace us today's webinar sessions with valuable information. I also would like to thank all the esteemed colleagues of Kokrajhar Law College for joining us. Lastly, I would like to thank all the students and other dignitaries who are joining us from other institutions in today's webinar. Once again, thanking you all for a truly memorable morning and we hope you can join us again in future. Have a
Sure,
nice
sure.
day ahead. Thank you all.
My pleasure. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you.
you, sir,
Thank you.
for
Thank you
the
very
for introducing the crux of criminal procedure before the participants. And I myself is benefited a lot with today's session. Seriously, I have been taking down notes also, sir, of your session, and I'm sure the students are also delighted by your deliberation. And I thank Dinah ma'am for coordinating and inviting you for today's session. It is indeed a very memorable morning, just like Suresh sir has said. So thank you, sir, and we hope to see you again in some other platform. Sir, thank you. You have a nice
Sure,
day.
sure. Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you also.
Thank you, participants. We will meet you again